Ladies and gentlemen, when a woman lives without sex, something far deeper than mere physical abstinence occurs. To speak of this is not to speak merely of biology or morality, but of the soul's journey, its longing, its silence, and its transformation. In the absence of physical union, a different kind of intimacy awakens, one that echoes through the chambers of her psyche, whispering both the burden and the brilliance of solitude. Let us look beyond the veil of flesh and enter the realm of symbols. For here lies the truth. The sexual act is not just an exchange of bodies, but a merging of inner worlds. And when this exchange is withheld, either by choice or fate, the energy does not vanish. It descends inward, where it may gestate into either darkness or light. When a woman lives without sex, the masculine energy that she once may have sought in others no longer finds its home outside of her. The absence of physical union with a man does not erase the archetype of masculinity. It merely calls it inward. And thus, what was once projected onto the external becomes activated within her own psyche. This inward stirring gives birth to a profound process, the awakening of her inner masculine. This masculine principle, her inner counterpart, has long lived in the shadows of her unconscious, often appearing in dreams as a stranger, a guide, or even an adversary. He may take the form of an imagined lover, a stern critic, or a voice of ambition. But without the outward relationship to carry his image, she is forced to confront him face to face, no longer as a man across from her, but as a presence within her own soul. At first, this energy can be disruptive. It can speak in commands and judgments, urging her to control, to criticize, to act without feeling. The undeveloped masculine is not tender. It is rigid, impatient, and exacting. He may flood her with restlessness, pushing her to achieve, to build, to conquer something undefined. And if she is not conscious of his presence, she may become dominated by it, driven by goals that do not nourish her, or haunted by a sense of inner conflict. But if she does not flee, if she turns toward this presence with curiosity rather than fear, the relationship begins to shift. The raw, wild force of the inner masculine begins to take shape. Slowly, it becomes her guide. It grants her clarity in decision-making, boundaries in relationships, and the courage to walk alone when needed. It gives her the ability to say no without guilt, and yes without dependence. It becomes a structure within her, like a spine for her soul. With time, her inner masculine becomes less a shadow and more a partner. He supports her inner life, protects her solitude, and helps her navigate the world with strength and precision. This is no longer a woman waiting to be completed by another. It is a woman who has met her own authority. She becomes sovereign. Her actions are not driven by lack, but by alignment. Her desires are not confused with hunger. They are informed by her own values and inner voice. And when such a woman eventually chooses to love, she does so not from need, but from fullness. She brings with her the entire kingdom of her inner world, and the man she chooses will not be a rescuer or a savior, but a companion on equal ground. Thus, the activation of the inner masculine is not a loss of something external, but the gaining of something internal. It is not the absence of a man, it is the birth of inner balance. It is a sacred, often painful, yet ultimately liberating transformation. In the silence left by sexual absence, a deeper voice begins to speak, and it is hers. When a woman lives without sex, the vibrant energy that once sought expression through physical union does not simply dissipate. This energy, often called libido, is the fundamental life force, the pulse of vitality itself. It is the creative fire that animates all living things, driving growth, passion, and transformation. When not discharged through the act of sex, this fire must find new outlets, new forms in which to manifest. Libido is far more than mere sexual desire. It is the fuel for all acts of creation, the primal energy behind every thought, feeling, and movement toward becoming. In the absence of a sexual partner, this energy does not languish or fade, but is redirected inward and outward toward other expressions of life. It becomes a river that changes its course, carving new paths through the landscape of the woman's inner and outer worlds. This redirection awakens a profound urge to create, not just in the literal sense of bearing children, but in the metaphorical sense of bringing forth something new from the depths of her being. It may flow into the realms of art, music, poetry, or dance channels where the soul speaks without words, and the unconscious reveals its hidden beauty. Through these creative acts, the woman gives form to the unspoken, the unseen, and the unexpressed parts of herself. At times, the redirected libido may manifest as a deep yearning for knowledge and wisdom. The energy moves into the mind, inspiring study, reflection, and the search for meaning. This intellectual pursuit is no mere distraction. It is an alchemical process in which raw desire is transmuted into insight and understanding. The woman becomes a seeker, not just of external truth, but of the truths that reside within her own psyche. Beyond the intellectual and artistic, this creative energy often expresses itself in acts of nurturing and care. The woman may pour her vitality into relationships with children, family, friends, or even the natural world. Here, the libido fuels empathy, compassion, and the sacred responsibility of sustaining life in all its forms. Her capacity to nurture becomes a powerful extension of her creative essence, a way of weaving her energy into the tapestry of the world. In this way, the woman's life without sex becomes fertile ground for a new kind of generation, a flowering of the self. The energy that once sought union in the body now finds union within the spirit. It births visions, dreams, and projects that transcend the physical. It invites her to become an artist of her own destiny, shaping her inner world and, through that, the outer world as well. What may seem like deprivation on the surface is, in truth, a profound redirection of life's most potent force. It is the movement of libido from the tangible to the intangible, from the transient to the eternal. Through this transformation, the woman learns that her vitality is not defined by the presence or absence of a partner, but by the creative power she holds within herself. Thus, the redirection of libido toward creation is not a loss but a metamorphosis. It is the awakening of a deeper life, a reclaiming of sacred energy that flows not outward to another body, but inward and outward in ways that nourish the soul and the world alike. In this sacred redirection, a woman discovers that her creativity is boundless and her life infinitely rich. When a woman lives without sex, she is often drawn into an encounter with parts of herself that have long been hidden in the dark recesses of the psyche, fragments that society, culture, and even her own conscious mind have preferred to keep unseen. This is the realm of the shadow, the collection of all those feelings, impulses, desires, and fears that she has denied, repressed, or projected onto others. Sexuality is a powerful mirror. It reflects not only desire and connection, but also vulnerability, shame, and fear. In the absence of a physical partner, the mirror becomes internalized, and the shadow no longer cast outward, rises up from within to be met face to face. This confrontation can be unsettling, even terrifying, for the shadow is not gentle. It often brings forth the rawest parts of the self: anger, loneliness, envy, self-doubt, and despair. At first, these dark elements may seem like enemies, threatening to overwhelm or fragment the woman's sense of identity. She may feel consumed by waves of longing, bitterness at her solitude, or frustration with unmet needs. She might wrestle with feelings of unworthiness or question her value, as the absence of sexual intimacy can echo deep cultural messages that equate worth with desirability. But the shadow is not simply an enemy to be vanquished. It is a guardian of authenticity. It holds the keys to self-knowledge and transformation. When the woman refuses to flee from her shadow and instead turns toward it with courage and honesty, she embarks on the most profound journey of integration. This process requires patience and compassion, for the shadow is often wounded, misunderstood, and aching for acknowledgement. By embracing the shadow, the woman begins to reclaim those lost or denied parts of herself. She sees that her anger is not weakness, but a signal of boundaries needing respect. Her loneliness becomes an invitation to deeper self-connection rather than mere isolation. Her envy reveals what she truly desires and values, guiding her toward what is missing within, rather than what is absent from without. This inner work reshapes her relationship with herself and the world. No longer fragmented or divided, she becomes whole. The shadow, once feared and rejected, becomes a source of strength and wisdom. It teaches her that wholeness is not perfection, but the acceptance of light and dark, strength and vulnerability, joy and pain. Living without sex, therefore, becomes not a state of lack but a crucible for shadow work, a sacred opportunity to dive beneath the surface and encounter the fullness of the self. The solitude that might seem barren at first reveals itself to be fertile ground for growth. The absence of physical intimacy calls her to a deeper intimacy with her own soul, where true healing and empowerment begin. In this confrontation with the shadow, she discovers an inner sovereignty that is not dependent on the presence of another. She learns that her value is intrinsic, rooted in the totality of her being, not merely in her capacity to love or be loved sexually. The shadow's dark face, when seen clearly, transforms from a source of fear into a gateway of liberation. Thus, the journey through the shadow in sexual absence is a pilgrimage to the center of the self. It is a passage through darkness toward light, fragmentation toward wholeness, and silence toward the deep song of the soul. And in this sacred process, the woman is reborn, wiser, stronger, and profoundly free. When a woman lives without sex, a subtle yet profound transformation often begins to unfold deep within her being. In the absence of physical union, the usual channels of connection and expression fall silent, opening space for a different kind of knowing to emerge, a knowing that is neither logical nor linear, but mystical and intuitive. This emergence is not something she can force or summon at will. It arises gently, like a dawn breaking slowly over the horizon of her consciousness. Mystical intuition is a language of symbols, feelings, and subtle perceptions that speak directly to the soul, bypassing the filters of rational thought. It is a quiet whisper in the depths of the unconscious, a beckoning toward truths that transcend the immediate and the material. As her body's sexual energy rests, her inner senses sharpen, tuning her to the rhythms and signs that ordinary awareness often overlooks. Without the distraction or fulfillment of sexual desire, she may find herself drawn into a heightened awareness of the world around her. The shifting patterns of light and shadow, the delicate scent of a flower, the ancient pulse of the seasons. Nature becomes a sacred text, and her heart a receptive page upon which the mysteries of life inscribe themselves. This attunement is a kind of silent prayer, a communion with something greater than the self, though impossible to name fully. Her dreams may deepen and intensify, carrying vivid imagery rich with archetypal symbols, animals, landscapes, figures who speak in riddles and paradoxes. These nightly journeys through the unconscious offer guidance and insight, revealing hidden desires, fears, and potentials. The dream images are not random but woven from the threads of her inner life, inviting her to explore her psyche with courage and imagination. Alongside dreams, moments of synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that defy logical explanation, begin to occur with greater frequency. These events are like signposts placed along her path, reminding her that she is part of a larger, interconnected whole. In these moments, the veil between the visible and invisible worlds thins, and she senses the presence of a guiding intelligence, whether she names it spirit, soul, or simply the mystery. Her body, no longer preoccupied with physical desire, becomes a vessel of subtle sensations, tingling, warmth, or an inexplicable lightness, that hint at an inner alchemy at work. This somatic awareness grounds her intuition, reminding her that the mystical is not separate from the physical, but woven through it in an invisible thread of life. In this way, the woman's sexual absence becomes a sacred space for the flowering of intuition, a gift that enriches every aspect of her being. She learns to trust this inner voice, even when it defies conventional wisdom or societal expectations. It teaches her to move through life with a sense of wonder, openness, and humility, knowing that some truths can only be grasped with the heart, not the mind. This mystical intuition is not simply a passive reception, but an active participation in the unfolding of life's mystery. It calls her to listen deeply, to be present, and to honor the unseen forces that shape her journey. Through this awakening, she cultivates a profound connection to herself, to others, and to the vast unknown, a connection that transcends the physical and touches the eternal. Thus, the emergence of mystical intuition in a woman who lives without sex is not a loss of vitality, but the discovery of a new kind of life force, one that flows from the wellspring of the soul and guides her toward wholeness, wisdom, and profound peace. It is a quiet revolution within, where silence becomes a sacred language and the invisible becomes her most trusted companion. When a woman lives without sex, she steps into a profound inner alchemy, a transformation that reaches far beyond the mere absence of physical union. This alchemy is the delicate and powerful process by which fragmented parts of her being are drawn together into a unified whole. It is a sacred marriage within, where opposing forces, light and shadow, masculine and feminine, desire and restraint, are reconciled and transmuted into a new state of being. This process often begins in solitude, in the quiet spaces where distractions fall away and the soul is free to speak. In the stillness, the woman encounters herself not as divided fragments, but as a complex and beautiful totality. She sees her fears, her desires, her strengths, and her vulnerabilities not as enemies to be battled or denied, but as essential elements of her inner landscape. Each part has its place, its value, and its contribution to the mosaic of her identity. The absence of sex, rather than being a void, becomes a crucible, a vessel in which transformation occurs. Just as raw metal in fire is purified and reshaped, so too does her psyche undergo a refining process. The longing and tension that might have once been directed outward are turned inward, becoming the energy that fuels this internal work. Through conscious reflection, honest self-examination, and acceptance, she begins to weave together the disparate threads of her nature. In this sacred weaving, the inner masculine and feminine, once split and scattered, are brought into harmony. The feminine, with its qualities of receptivity, intuition, and nurturing, finds balance with the inner masculine's clarity, strength, and decisiveness. Neither dominates nor diminishes the other. Instead, they dance together in a dynamic equilibrium. This inner marriage, or conjunctio, is the heart of the alchemical process and the source of true wholeness. As this union deepens, the woman transcends the roles and identities that society often imposes, wife, lover, mother, object of desire, and discovers her selfhood beyond these categories. She becomes sovereign, standing in her own power, grounded in an identity that is not contingent on others' presence or validation. This sovereignty is quiet yet fierce, tender yet unyielding. The alchemy of wholeness also transforms her relationship to life itself. Freed from fragmentation, she moves through the world with a new grace and confidence. Her actions arise from alignment rather than compulsion. Her choices reflect an inner harmony rather than outer pressures. In this state, she embodies a kind of sacred completeness, a living testament to the resilience and mystery of the human spirit. This transformation is not without struggle. The alchemical fire often burns fiercely, consuming old patterns and illusions. It calls for courage and patience, for the willingness to descend into darkness before rising again. But through this process, the woman is reborn, not as someone lacking or incomplete, but as a radiant whole, fully present in her essence. In the fullness of this alchemy, she comes to know that true intimacy is not dependent solely on the body's union, but is first and foremost a union within the self. This inner wholeness becomes the foundation from which all other connections flow, creating relationships that are richer, more authentic, and deeply grounded. Thus, the alchemy of wholeness in a woman who lives without sex is a profound transformation, a sacred journey through fire and shadow toward the light of self-realization. It is the realization that she is not fragmented or broken, but a complete and sacred vessel, capable of profound love, creativity, and wisdom. In this wholeness, she finds freedom, peace, and the deep knowing that she is enough, just as she is.